In general, Rogue have been criticized as quite a one-dimensional team in the way that they've played. Uh, a lot of triple DPS, a lot of dive, very aggressive. They don't really have that many tools to their playbook, etc., etc. These are all criticisms that have been leveled at them. One tricks that are just on their favorite heroes, etc., etc. All right, and in the community in general, a lot of people are crying, mourning the death of Reinhardt, telling everybody that dive's the worst thing they've ever played and every team only plays dive. So maybe this and other videos that I produce like this will help you, if you're one of those whiners, appreciate the intricacies and different flavors of different dive compositions. This one that we're looking at here is Rogue's new defensive composition. You can see it at the top left of your screen. And this is not a comp that they used to play at all. I'm pretty sure, I think they maybe played it. Did they even play it once in Takeover? Do you know what? I'm not sure. But before that, they hadn't played it at all because AKM would always be on the Soldier 76 in this, or possibly Pharah. Or sometimes even when they were playing as something like Anubis, he would go over to Reaper, but he hasn't played the D.Va, and that's what makes this one so different. Because anytime that they wanted to play Winston D.Va in the past, it had to be Nico playing it, and that meant that they couldn't run the Genji because nobody else on the team runs the Genji, and that was why Nico was added to the team in the first place. So Rogue now have the opportunity to broaden their horizons in terms of compositions, in terms of the flavors of dive that they can incorporate into their team, because AKM in the space between Takeover and now, what is that? A month and a bit. He's been working on his D.Va by the look of it, and probably a little bit before that as well. And so AKM, in a lot of the defensive compositions that Rogue now run, is going to be on this D.Va, and they like to play Genji Tracer on defense, and this is odd for starters, and really doesn't fit the game plan of quite a lot of teams. The common consensus among professional players in terms of how they think about dive compositions is, if you're on defense, you probably want to be playing the Soldier Tracer compositions, playing a little bit slower, you're poking into people, you've got a lot more damage potential, it's a bit more defensive, your backline's protected a bit better, etc. Genji Tracer, you want to be going into the enemy team, probably want to be playing it on attack, etc. Rogue kind of flipping that on his head a little bit here, but there are a lot of teams that play Genji Tracer on defense as well. It's just interesting because Rogue never used to in the past, and now they predominantly play Soldier Tracer on offense and Genji Tracer on defense. It is a little bit map dependent. They don't do it on Dorado. They run a Zen Ana composition with Soldier 76 and a Tracer when they're pretty much holding for the most of Dorado, because the defense has got a lot of high ground that it can work around. They don't do the Soldier Tracer attack on Anubis, for example, because it's very difficult to get value out of the Soldier 76 because there's so many obstacles and stuff, and it's not easy to get onto the high ground when you're attacking, and there really aren't very good sightlines, things like this. But in general, when you look across all of their maps that they played in Beat, this does seem to be their policy at the moment, is that on defense, we want to be running Genji Tracer and AKM on the D.Va, and most of the time Unko on Ana as well, which again is slightly different. They used to run Unko on Ana for defense fairly often, but most teams at the moment are still running a Zen on defense. And what does this do? What does this composition allow you to do? Well, for starters, it allows you to take control. It allows you to grab the defense by the balls. It allows you to set the tempo. If you want to dive into the enemy team, you go. You dive into the enemy team. You do what you want, But you can also play defensively with Genji Tracer. And the biggest reason for that is because they don't have the opportunity to dive onto your Soldier 76. If you're trying to, say Immortals here, oh no, they're not running the Soldier 76 comp either. Let's pretend that Agilities is playing the Soldier, even though it's Grim that actually plays it on the team. But let your imagination wander, if you possibly can, to Agilities picking up Soldier 76. I know it's a struggle. If they were on defense here and you're diving into this, Karev on Zen, so the Zen is a very good target for you to dive onto. The Soldier 76 is a very good target for you to be able to dive onto. Doesn't have as much mobility, is easily taken down if you get a decent dive onto him, even though he can put out a lot of damage and he has his healing station. And they've essentially removed both of those components. Unko can kind of hold his own a little more. Although if you get the D.Va onto him, it essentially eats all of his biotic nades and everything. So that's GG at that point. But in general, he can defend himself a little better, and there's no opportunity to dive under the Soldier 76 because Nico's running the Genji. And crucially, if you try and play into their tanks, if you try and really focus down Nox and AKM, theoretically, this defense should also have a better chance of keeping them alive as well, because again, you can use the biotic grenades to keep Nox and AKM alive along with the healing. Again, though, you are playing into Fate's barriers, bubbles, and Hype's defense matrix, so the heals, I think, is a little bit theoretical that you're going to be able to consistently put out better heals onto your tanks, but in general, it does seem to be the case that Unko is able to keep his tanks alive more when he's playing Ana than when he's just on Zen and putting the Harmony on them. Obviously, Harmony is not blocked by either defense matrix or the bubble, whereas everything from Ana is every single thing. So what you'll see them do in this fight actually is go super aggressive with it. So this is one of the tempos that they can do. So they're starting out on King's Row on the defense, and they're set up here, and Unko's going to stay in the back, and the rest of them, as soon as they see Immortals forward, they're just going to speed boost straight through here and absolutely take it. And you see that Unko, we'll dial that back a little bit as well. So they use the speed boost from Winds, and you can see here as well that the bubble is put down just to block any damage that's coming onto them, and the biotic grenade is also used there to keep them all healthy as they go in onto the dive, and they're intended just to take a fight there. And this really isn't something that you can do if you're running the Soldier 76 defense, like the double hit scan D.Va Winston composition. You're really sitting more passive. And if you look on a couple of other maps as well, I'm not going to show you examples of it, but if you look on a couple of other maps, when the enemy's diving into them, what'll happen is Nico and Soon just literally spread out from each other. Unko will either rotate like he does on Hollywood to bait the dive coming in from a certain angle, or he will just or they'll try and get the dive in, and Nox and AKM will fold back onto the rest of the team, and they'll play like this defensive strategy where they're just kind of curling in onto everybody. And it does seem to be more defensive play coming out from Rogue at the moment. In general, when they used to play this lights out aggressive style, when they're just picking a target, diving into them, and with absolute clinical precision and incredible individual skill, this is the style that we saw from them when they were playing triple DPS in North America and crushing everybody. This is the style that we saw from them when they were at Takeover and playing triple DPS into triple DPS and absolutely crushing everybody, including E United 3 times in a row. And this is kind of the style that they tried to use at Apex, and it didn't work because they're playing into divas, and it wouldn't work now, I don't think, as well as it used to, because a lot of the North American teams have worked in the D.Va into their composition in a much better way than they had back when Rogue were on that ridiculous spree before they went to Apex. And what the D.Va does is you're able to peel for the people that Rogue instantly dive on. For example, if Rogue are playing the offense and they instantly dive onto Karev in the back, Hyped is able to turn around and peel, and by the time Rogue have actually adjusted, they've given up so much positioning with their dive, and they've failed to actually get the damage out that they thought because the defense matrix has mitigated it all, that Immortals, if they were playing defensively in that sense, would be able to get the advantage over them. So that's why the aggressive style that Rogue used to run is kind of falling out of fashion with them a little bit, and they're kind of adapting their compositions. And this defensive comp as well is a defensive comp. You know, it's more of it's a comp that you can play defensively or you can play hyper aggressively, and it gives you a lot of flexibility in how you run it. And this was something that Rogue couldn't do before, as I say, because AKM just didn't pick up the D.Va. Now, something that does happen to them fairly often, actually, though, is that with this new change with AKM coming onto the D.Va, and just in general, actually, with the way that they've incorporated D.Va into their teams, I think the example that I'm going to give you now is actually Nico on D.Va, because they change it for the Foundry section of King's Row, because this area here is much more open. The sides are just, I mean, it's just one tunnel, essentially, with a couple of flank routes, right? So there aren't obstacles in the way. There aren't things that the Genji can really use to his advantage. Much more clear, open sight lines within the set parameters of the walls of the King's Row Foundry. So you get a lot more value out of AKM on Soldier 76 in this position. So now they have the flexibility to be able to chop and change between the two. And so they've made the shift here, and this happens multiple times if you watch this series with AKM, and in this instance it's with Nico as well. And there does seem to be a bit of miscommunication with the way that Rogue sometimes, especially the way that Nox runs with his D.Va and with like the rest of his team here as well. because you can see here, if I play it forwards, that Nox is hiding up here in this little window area. And the idea of this spot is that you're able to drop down, so you don't have to use your leap to be able to engage into them. You do a lot of damage and disruption, you can drop your bubble, and then you can either leap out, you can get matrixed out by your D.Va, or somebody can come and save you with like a support ultimate if you want to commit to the fight full on. Or Nox can save himself with the Primal Rage. They have so many tools here to save Nox, or for Nox to save himself. But something goes wrong with their communication, and it does a couple of times where Nox ends up getting caught out here. And so as Nox drops down, so you see him just drop down there on the left, he places his bubble, and you'll see that the bubble mitigates a lot of the damage. Fate jumps back, so they're playing defensively, trying to focus down Nox to get this early pick. Nico dives in to try and get some kind of defense matrix onto Nox and eat some of the damage, but Nox takes a huge ton of damage. And instead of relying on either the matrix to get him out of there, which is on him, but it doesn't look like it's quite worked, Nox could then just use the Primal Rage. They don't have to commit support ultimates to this until Immortals commit them. And they actually end up overlapping both the Primal Rage and the Transcendence in this situation. And there's a couple of times later on in the map, and once, I think, when they were playing against Arc 6, not once, but a couple of times when they're playing against Arc 6 here as well, where a similar thing will happen where Nox goes in fairly aggressively. So Nox is either hidden in a position like this or leaps forward onto somebody, and it looks like he's expecting the defense matrix to be up, and instead, most often it seems to happen with AKM, the D.Va is shooting at people rather than matrixing, and Nox ends up dying. And so that seems like a weak point at the moment, and especially in this tournament that I've noticed with Rogue, is that Nox is dying fairly often when they have the tools to be able to support him. And I've got a couple of videos coming later on where you'll be able to see that those situations aren't the crux of what I'm talking about in those later videos, but it's definitely a recurring trend as I go through picking out moments and analyzing this, that Nox has always actually been an excellent Winston within Rogue. When they play the triple DPS comp, I don't think there's any Winston in North America that was playing it better than him in that situation. But now that they've integrated the D.Va much more often into their style, it does seem like Nox is getting caught out more often by teams that are playing defensively and just trying to spam him down and focus him as an early target super quickly. And that's not so much because Nox is out of position or going in early. It seems like there's either miscommunication in how they want to save him, or the D.Va just isn't there to be able to matrix him at the times where he needs it. So it's kind of a strange one. But as like an added little bonus here for anybody who's still watching after my drivel, here's a really sick play by Nox. Here's an absolutely amazing play that I caught. And I'll just play it through, actually. I'll just play it through and then we'll rewind it, because this is glorious.
Difficult for a defense, and in terms of offensive options, as you mentioned, blades and barriers, we'll see what Agility has in store.
Hyped also has a self-destruct if they want to try to zone this out. The barrier does come in.
Agility's gonna get the barrier. The barrier did not hit him. He dove in thinking he had it. He did not. Not a situation where he pulled out the blade, and they only have 3 seconds. He can't go back. He must pull out the blade here, regardless of whether or not it's a good idea. Finds Unco, though. Is the hope going to be alive? Grim is down, and Rogue suffocating Immortals on this final point.
Suffocating indeed, ZP. Suffocating indeed. So if we go back to when that actually happened. Okay, so
all that often.
Oops. Let me mute them again. So this is 23 seconds, Immortals' final push in, and their idea is to do this classic blade and barrier. So blade and the sound barrier allows your Genji to have so much extra health, and they can go in and chop, and even if the enemy uses some kind of support ultimate, particularly the barrier, if they barrier in return, Agilities can still get value out of it because can just use his entire blade chopping at people, doesn't have to worry about any damage that's coming into him, and can probably even get a kill out of it if they respond with a barrier. But in this situation, Verbo gets utterly dumpstered by Nox's amazing barrier placement. And Nox is so aware of what they want to do here. They know that Verbo's the only one with the ult on the defensive ult on the team. They know that Karif doesn't have it. And you can see that he's positioned behind the payload. So he's just got himself set up. There he is. He's just behind the payload there. And Verbo is over here. So Verbo's made his way forwards and he's making his way towards the back, and he's just positioned at the back there. So there's Verbo. Agilities is there, and he's going to climb up top and engage from top. And there's Nox, the 3 big players here. And Nox gets his leap pretty early on. He goes for a leap in, gets into the back lines, and Nico does a little bit of a defense matrix for him. You can see Nox places his barrier down about a second before Verbo uses his ultimate, and the barrier perfectly blocks line of sight for that ultimate so that it only hits on Hyped and Verbo. So you can see there's Nox in the backlines. He's already taken down Karif, and he's placed this bubble to expertly block Verbo in. Verbo was just playing in this little passageway, and Nox has leapt back, put down his barrier, and it must have been just as Verbo had made the decision to engage with Agilities. It's just been called in the comms. Right, now is the time to go in. Nox has read this perfectly, jumps to the back line, barrier down, and it blocks line of sight here, and this sound barrier doesn't get onto Agilities, and it completely cripples the push. And you can see here that the only 2 people that got the sound barrier, Hyped and Verbo, were playing in this corner and utterly blocked them with this barrier. Absolutely clutch play coming out from Nox, and then he uses his Primal Rage just to kind of keep them back in the whole fight as well. So there's a great play from Nox as well, just a little added extra, a little bonus at the end of this video. I thought that was absolutely sick.